Alright, are we finally live in the correct way? I have to go delete that little video that I guess I just left on the other channel. Anyway, welcome back. I think just surfing through some more technical difficulties, I guess, as I make stupid mistakes trying to get this shit on the road. I was like, I'm just gonna start at the stream because I think everything's set up and the cat is on the camera and this is great, and I just need to make a cup of tea. I just need some tea and then I'll be back. Yeah, I'll be right back. Let me give you a little bit of cat cam. Oh, and now of course he's not on the camera, but yeah. Oh, you're way over here, Tuco. Hey. I think I deleted the stream that I just accidentally sent to the other channel, but I might have to clean that up later. Oh man, technology is just this endless string of mistakes, and I usually don't let them get to me, but sometimes it's just really frustrating to keep messing things up. Like I thought I had gone through and gotten everything completely set up, and of course I always miss something. And of course this time it was that I changed all the configuration files but didn't restart the daemon, so whatever. I guess stuff's working. Hi, welcome back to the show. I don't have a whole lot of just like completely new stuff to go into right now. So I figured we'd actually do something that's, well, like, I guess useful for the Tuco Flyer project and just make some progress on the software and getting it such that we can control it via chat. Since I think a lot of us are looking forward to just being able to drive the camera around via Twitch chat or via letsrobot.tv, and that's gonna be fun. I was trying to prioritize stuff to kind of focus on editing together some videos with what we've done so far, because the footage is really piling up and I really need to edit more of those videos together. I've been bad at allocating time between the editing and the streaming, but as usual, I'll keep trying to improve on that. So anyway, I was going to try to save enough energy to do editing later, but to, you know, at least like do something fun today, because, you know, we didn't have a stream yesterday, and I wanted to get a new stream up on the new channel soon, and so yeah, let's just dive into working on the software. Yeah, so right now the gimbal follows him around with computer vision, but I still have to drive the camera manually if I want it to move, and of course, I keep misplacing the controller. Where did I put it this time? Oh, Tuco's got a great view, actually. We can probably see him from here. No? Oh. Yeah. There are so many different kinds of wobble. Oh man. So like one of the kinds of wobble that happens is that when the pendulum starts swinging, the the computer vision and the gimbal tracking can actually start amplifying the oscillation. And so sometimes after I move the camera, I'll like halt the tracking for a bit until that dies down. That'll all be better in the future once we have better motion control software, but for the moment, the motion's going to be kind of wobbly because the control is really naive. Oh, yeah, sorry. Anybody who's used to having like moderator access on the YouTube chat will have lost it in the transition to the new channel, but I'll fix that. So yeah, sorry this one's starting off a little slower than usual as I make a bunch of mistakes trying to actually get the stream moved over, but yeah. So, I'm gonna say, first of all, that I really, I don't need, a bunch of, tons of backseat driving about what we should do to fix the wobble, because I'm already at the point where there are so many things I know of to do that are just on the list, and I'm just not going into those because it's a distraction from the things that are a little higher priority right now. So, if you've got something that you're you just are really sure that I haven't heard of it and you just want to mention it, then maybe mention it. But just let's try to avoid going down too many wobble related rabbit holes, because I've been thinking about this a lot. That might surprise you, but I have actually been thinking about this a lot, and I have a lot which I will be saying about it in the next couple of videos that I edit together. So I'll try to summarize my thoughts on it there, and then there are a lot of both software and hardware fixes that we can make to improve it. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that right now. So yeah, right now the motion of the bot is manual. Well, I say manual. There are a couple of different degrees of manual control. There's a completely manual mode where I'm just moving the winches around. The thing it's doing right now is a little bit higher level than that, but it's still pretty low level. And before I have any kind of automatic control of the winch motion, either via chat or via computer vision, it needs collision avoidance, it needs smoother motion, and that means a bunch of things. It means fixing a bunch of the individual bugs that are causing the oscillation. It means having an active damping system for the vibrations that do show up. It means having oscillation detection so that we can avoid moving it if the oscillations get too bad, until the damping takes effect, for example. It means just being much smarter about how to proportion the tension between the winches. Right now, it's effectively kind of like a bang-bang control oscillator or control algorithm that oscillates, because it's not quite that bad. There's a little bit of softness as it changes states, but it's way too stateful, where the winches sort of have a normal mode and then a mode where they're outside their force limit and they're trying to correct, and they like to oscillate in between the two states, which causes even more vibration. So there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot going on in the motion control, and I've been trying to figure out how to divide up the video footage and all that, and because I think what I've often done with my footage on this channel is just collect up just like months of work into just like a 10-minute video that is just packed with stuff and doesn't really explain stuff in that much depth, but tries to just like give you this tidal wave of relevant information that you might like pick out some bits and pieces of, which I find aesthetically interesting, and it's an interesting experience, but I'd also like to have some content that stretches out the information, you know, such that it's a little bit easier to absorb, maybe. And then I also get like more videos out of, you know, the months of work that go into that. So I've been trying to figure out how to do that a little bit more, and just, you know, I think a lot of people would also, I've gotten the feedback that some people would at least appreciate having like more just edited content. I mean, not just like more of it, but just stuff that is like slower and more in depth, and that kind of goes into more of these details. So the situation I'm finding myself in now is I'm going through this pile of footage, and it's like, wow, I've got all this footage for me just like assembling the winches, and that itself is not especially interesting. And so I'd been assuming I would use that as B-roll in something else to kind of like, you know, it's like using the footage as filler. It's like, you know, like stirring the cornstarch into your soup or something. And, you know, but I could also see myself just like taking that footage and maybe editing it interestingly, or adding some other B-roll to it, because I've also got stuff that's even less relevant that I could use as B-roll for that footage, and then just like talk over it and use that as a way of talking about something relevant to that part of the design. So that could be interesting. I've been figuring out how to separate those out. And then, yeah, as usual, let me know if you have feedback, stuff that you'd really like to see more of, or stuff that you don't care for that much, or stuff that, especially with the videos I want to do on USB, if there are specific things that just like weird you out about USB that you'd like to have addressed, then that would be good to know. So, yeah, let's dig right into this. So I think actually we want to be working on the Windows machine today. This is the unfortunate thing of the Rust software running on the same machine I do the streaming from, so I don't get the benefit of having like the separate machine. So let me plug an HDMI cable into the right spot. That. Okay, I need more SDI outputs on that rack, surprisingly. I have this one video channel it's like hooked up to the GPU on the streaming machine. I think I just want to duplicate a bunch of copies of it to go all over the shop, because I have 2 copies and I already need apparently 3. This is the one where if I have just Tuco Flyer monitors all over the place, this is the video feed they would get. But right now we're going to use this for coding. I can't really imagine that strategy James is suggesting working that well. The editing tends to require a lot more work than that. I mean, what I do is I try, like, to make it faster to go through the footage. I do use time lapsing a lot. Like, I have a lot of automation that breaks up chunks of footage into like 16x up through 4096x time lapses, so that I can more easily find the pieces I want. And then I just like grab all that in Premiere, and then in Premiere you can like just scrub through at faster than 1x speed, or just it's not that hard to find the footage. It's just this process that takes time, and like I don't know, like a lot of the obvious improvements are things that are probably already in the pipeline, right? Because like this is a thing people do as a day job. Like video editing is a thing a lot of people put time into optimizing. So far the point that I'm at isn't like inventing new ways of making video editing faster. It's just like personally learning the skills that that I need to make my workflow fast enough. Anyway, why did I open a web browser? I need to open Sublime Text. And Terminal. Oh, got BPMs in here. SD Swartz says Wobble-related rabbit hole is the name of their next band. Nice. Alright, I have some config changes, which I think are mostly good, actually. Just from, like, tweaks. Alright, just a few things. I think my Git repo is clean now. So this is running right now. Like, this is the code that it usually runs in a little terminal. Prints out a QR code with the URL when it starts, and that has a web interface that I can then use to control it. It doesn't have a real logging system yet, so I've got a few semi-severe error messages here, like momentarily losing communication with things, which it just spews out here occasionally, but I'll fix that in the future. Oh, sorry about the slurping, but the tea is just so good. So last time we talked about this, where were we? So like specifically, I'm thinking about adding, so we're on the topic of adding chat commands to this bot. Eventually the kinds of chat commands might be pretty varied. So there's like me writing the code for the bot. Morex has been contributing some code for, where is this? GitHub. For the chatbot interaction, which, like, one of the first things we should do is probably just take a look at that and see what the status is there. Because this was something that was like kind of far away from what I was working on, and it was like an easy place to have like some contributions. And so they wrote this thing a while ago. Yeah, this was 11 months ago now, before the bot was really anywhere near ready to run. But it was going to be like, well, actually, what was it? So yeah, we were talking about how to do the interaction and imagining that there could be commands that are like, imagine, it basically maps to my control stick that I have for the robot right now. So I have one control stick which maps to the camera. I can do that. And then there's one control stick which maps to like the XY plane position of the robot, roughly. And then I can use these buttons to go up and down. Like that. So, we were imagining that there could just be something that's like a chat command, some kind of prefix, and then like WASD or left, right, up, down for just each of those two sticks. That would work, but I mean, I've been just trying to, I guess the reason it was kind of hard to collaborate on this part of the project at that point was I really had no idea what to do, and the thing that I was trying to communicate at the time was just to try to be like flexible and prototypey about what we're doing because I have no idea what we're doing. And so there's this, but I don't know if this is actually what we want at this point. And actually they already started another repo with some different client code based on some of the somewhat more recent ideas. So that's this stuff, the Tuco Chat, Twitch, CLI, and Gitter repos. Let's see what's in here. So yeah, I've been trying to, just since then, do a little bit of prototyping, and the lowest fidelity way I can think of to prototype is to use the existing WebSocket front end that I have. So I can go to the robot and just get this local connection. This is using the same WebSocket interface that the clients would be using. We could have another interface, but it seems like the simplest thing to do is just have the clients use this. So I was just going to this website and then just seeing what it was like trying to interact with this over Twitch's 7-second delay. I know we could probably get better latency through Let's Robot, but right now I'm thinking maybe Twitch is just where I'm starting in my thinking because it's kind of worst case. Like anything that'll work on Twitch will also work on Let's Robot, and then Let's Robot might also support some new stuff that Twitch is too high latency for. Let's see. It would also be nice to start integrating with Let's Robot. I think the main barrier there is that they've just got like a completely different streaming infrastructure, where last time I looked at it, it was a Python client that used FFmpeg to stream H.264, or maybe it was even Motion JPEG. Just like some pretty low bitrate stuff, though, with latency as their focus, like optimizing for low latency. They had a Python client, which I think was using FFmpeg just to stream from the Raspberry Pi camera out over UDP. And then they had a remote server turning that into something that the clients could deal with over like HTTP live streaming. So that's an interesting approach, but it would require some work to glue that into OBS, which is what I'm using. And it's like cool with all the standard protocols, but I might need to make my own little like output plugin specifically for Let's Robot. Like I could do something where I have FFmpeg like slurp the video down from Nginx and then send it to Let's Robot. And that might be the thing to do to try it, just to prototype, because that wouldn't require any special purpose programming. But I would expect that to be kind of high latency. And so I think the thing to do to really optimize for latency is actually to write another OBS plugin that does Let's Robot streaming. Or like whatever their protocol is. I forget whether it's something custom. I think they're just dumping video frames out over UDP. After compression. I don't know if there's more to it than that. It seemed pretty low level. I keep finding debris from this video shoot. Oh, so James, I know that you weren't talking about time-lapsing. I mean that I know what you're, like, that process of taking 12 hours of video and editing it down to 1 good hour takes, like, that's the slow part. Like, just saying, oh, just do that. Like, that doesn't solve the problem. You're just restating the problem. Oh yeah, and thanks, Vince. As Vince was announcing, if you're having trouble with the YouTube streaming, we are live on Twitch at twitch.tv/scanlime if that streaming platform works better for you right now. And I do keep an eye on the chat on the native platforms too. And we also have the Gitter chat right up there, actually, if I know how to point to it. So I was trying to just interact with the robot using this thing through the Twitch delay. Like, I mean, actually, let's just do that. Because I can actually show you exactly what this feels like, and then we can talk about how the chat controls might be. Just for like another bit of, I don't know, like baseline setting, I guess, for this. Let's first like start the robot. So first of all, like, just watch. Let's see what. Oh, Tuco. I was going to start up the stream and just I could see what the latency was like there. Where is he? Oh, there he is. All right, so I'm going to start the stream now. There's a weird screechy noise. I don't think that's anything I'm doing. Whoa, oscillation. So that oscillation is, so here's the thing. Every time the camera does something wrong and it's like vibrating or swinging or oscillating, it's like there are several distinct kinds of root causes, and so it's almost like we could have story time on each of those individual root causes. So like that particular swinging was actually probably related to the integrator in the pitch tracking PID loop, and specifically when Tuco is standing really tall and taking up most of the frame. And so there are a bunch of ways we could maybe fix that, either by changing the gains in that PID loop, or possibly even just by taking that as a cue to back up. If he's taking that much of the frame, then we're not going to have an easy time tracking him anyway, so maybe we just want to give him some more space. So anyway, this is going to be a little harder because the coordinate systems right now are not being transformed. So the actual chat controls, it'll definitely know enough to say like go toward Tuco, go away, go like, you know, strafe left and right or whatever, like kind of perpendicular to that direction, and then up and down. You will be able to transform things relative to the camera, but that just isn't implemented right now. So I could, for example, if I just inform myself about where things are, so I can do that in my head. If I wanted to get closer to Tuco, I couldn't just like run it until I see the frame I want and then stop. I'd have to kind of guess, well, how much do I want that? But we do have the feedback from all the sensors. So actually the two limitations here, one limitation is going to be the height of the robot. The height is going to be, I mean, it'll be running a closed loop system of some sort, trying to keep the robot at like within two height bounds relative to the floor, or whatever it senses as the floor. So if it's over a pile of junk, it'll think the floor is a little higher than it actually is, which won't be bad. Like, it'll be bad if it thinks the floor is lower than it actually is, but that shouldn't be possible with these sensors unless it gets really unlucky with reflections. But yeah, could that even happen? I can't even think of a way that could happen. So yeah, it's got these 3 LiDAR sensors, which it'll use to estimate height above the floor. So if I commanded it to move in the direction toward Tuco, the camera would go lower until it got to effectively the height of the furniture in the room. Because the wires aren't going to go any lower than like the tops of my shelving here. So the saucer section where the wires attach will be stuck about that distance. And assuming the sensors don't detect anything else around the bottom section of the robot, that'll be a ½ meter or whatever below the saucer section. So, so what would probably happen is the saucer would drop down to its lowest height, and then it would kind of slide toward Tuco, but then at some point you would start hitting that lower pitch limit because Tuco would start to be almost directly down. And I should also clarify that at this point I have a software pitch limit which is fairly like conservative relative to what the hardware is capable of now, completely for photography reasons. Like, I just don't want the camera aiming directly down. I want it to be at least like 10 degrees or so up from down, just because otherwise it's confusing for the human vision and the computer vision. So that limit is purely an aesthetic choice right now. The hardware can go lower. I just chose to do it that way. So I don't like having to like defend every single choice. I feel like the way like engine nerds are, like you describe the way your system works, and they assume that you just hadn't considered any of the other ways it might work. So let's see if I can navigate this without the sensors. Yeah, this would be a lot easier with the coordinate system transformation, because I could just go toward Tuco, and it would know where everything's pointed enough to make that work, I think. Yeah, see, like, without the sensors, I just wouldn't be comfortable doing that with just the twitch. I would knock into things. Like, looking at the robot and just using my, like, RC pilot skills, such as they are, like, I can aim this in the right place. But, and see, now it's close enough that I think you'd be hitting that same vertical oscillation, and I think it would back up a little bit. So that time I tried to just like make an approximate movement looking at only the Twitch stream, and I guess such as that is, it works. But of course, like, out of the corner of my eye, I see the live view just like oscillate before the Twitch stream actually moves at all. So the other thing is there's all this extra oscillation. If I hit the halt button here, then that actually, some of the oscillation goes away if you look closely. Like, some of it is still there, but there's another like species of oscillation that was also there, which went away when it hit halt, and that was the feedback being caused by the computer vision and the gimbal. Whereas this oscillation is, there's a low frequency component that's the leash swinging side to side, but the higher frequency component that you're noticing more on the camera is just like the pendulum action of the robot itself. I wonder if I can, when it's been really bad, I've been able to just like by hand damp it out just a little bit. But I think for subtle enough oscillation like this, you'd need a computer at the driver's seat to make the active damping work at all. It doesn't help having such a confusing coordinate system. Yeah. There are other bugs that are making that hard right now at the very end. Like, I can kind of actively damp really severe vibration by just trying to move this out of phase, which was harder before because I had the acceleration limits on this manual control turned really low, but I amped up the acceleration limits to try to make it easier to do stuff like that. But there's a different bug, or even multiple bugs. It might even be multiple bugs, but there's at least one bug which causes the motor to kind of stutter at the very end of a motion. So as it slows down, it just kind of goes in and out of the position dead zone in the motor controller's pit loop. That's an easy fix. I've just been procrastinating that one because I've got a bunch of other stuff to fix, and that one is in the firmware. But yeah, there's that. Levisan says WebRTC streaming would be awesome for latency. Are there, I don't know much about WebRTC, like that's just a protocol, right? Like are there specific services you would recommend, or are you saying I should set up my own WebRTC server? Or are you saying I should write a patch for Let's Robot so that they do WebRTC? Like, what do you want about that? Yeah, I guess the latency experiments I was doing were more useful when it was more about like looking for Tuco, because like when I hadn't seen Tuco, it was like, well, how many, like, what move commands would I send to the robot to try to like search the space? And I found myself thinking, well, I would be holding down the manual control at this angle for this many seconds. And so what about a chat command that's like, go, look down and to the left, and then there's like, I don't know how to communicate the strength or distance or whatever, because for me, I would be using the muscle memory from the manual controls and thinking, well, how long would it take if I just slammed the control all the way over? And I could use that as a reference point. But maybe there's some kind of visual metaphor. Like, I was starting to think about how the chat controls would interact with the screen overlay that you're seeing. Because there's a bunch of overlay stuff. So you've got the little cat sprites that just follow the computer vision rectangle, and then there's the static stuff down here. There's this position indicator that shows you where the camera is on the gimbal. The obvious thing would be a little compass that says WAS and D, but how do you specify how long? Is it fixed? Like, I don't think I want to limit people to just 4 different directions is also the thing. So maybe something that's got like degrees on it. Yeah, and then I'm thinking about like, well, how would you indicate like the distance? And I was almost wondering if there could be some kind of visual metaphor about like charging up a power meter or something and then like emptying that into the motion. And that might also kind of relate to, well, I was thinking about the commands themselves, and I definitely want a way to show the manual controls on the screen. So when I use this remote, it should be obvious that that's what's happening. And right now you can kind of tell, you can kind of tell like if I'm moving the, if I move the vision rectangle around, you can see that little orange outline sort of, but it would be nice to have just more of a direct view of what's going on. And if I move the winch, like those controls are not visible here at all. Like you'd have to see them on the graphs if I have those up. Have a lower latency view here if we want. So then there's these labels from the computer vision. There's a bunch of debug stuff like that we probably don't actually want. So object detector outlines. But yeah, I was thinking about having some kind of little UI structure, like maybe in the corner of the screen here, that's like a queue of commands. So like when Morix and I were talking about this before, the idea was like a voting system would be cool, and that still might be part of what goes on. But I'm also thinking it would be nice to have like a command queue, like a list of things that the chat has entered in. I wouldn't want it to be really long, necessarily. Like I don't want you to have to be planning like 30 minutes in advance or whatever. But if you have like a little queue of commands here that could just have like a few things in it at a time, and then maybe you have some warning for what the robot's going to do, and then there are commands that you can use to kind of like do battle with the queue if you want. So you could basically have a voting system that works to modify the content of the upcoming command queue. And then as the commands get closer to the present time, they get harder to modify maybe, and then they become active. And then, so there could be like a little scrolling roll of commands that you still have some input into maybe, and then they get to the top, and then there's like some animation, like a progress bar or something that could show that command happening. So the commands could be things like tilt the camera or move in a particular way. And the movements could be combinations of camera movement and platform movement, or they could be just platform movement or camera movement or whatever. Yeah, Turing complete voting. Yeah, I don't know how the voting is actually going to work. I mean, I think the simplest thing I want is just somebody to be able to give me a command that points the gimbal. And then once we have something like that, we can actually start to see how it is with people. Because just picking up the robot controller makes it so much easier to see how the robot reacts. And I think watching how people react or interact with the commands, with the latency, with the chat environment, with multiple people, that's going to help a lot. Hey, Fuzz boy. Ryan suggests a map of the room that you can just point and click on. Yeah, but that's not how this robot works. This robot doesn't do absolute positioning, and it's not like about that. It's about like things that you can do relative to where it is right now. I'm much more interested in having feedback loops that involve the motion and the computer vision together than just having like absolute positioning. One of the things that we will have is some vague notion of absolute positioning based on the force sensors, but it's not going to be that accurate, and I don't plan on using it for like position, store, and recall. It's not really going to be for that. You can also see where the... Oh, Tuco. Yeah, you can lay on my hand, just not the keyboard. Oh, that is so sweet, honey. You can also see those little vertical stripes now that show you the gain regions from the tracking algorithm. I don't know, there's a bunch of little overlays that I could add for the interactive control once we have that. Oh, Tuco, this is extremely cute. Aw. Yeah, well, if you want the full screen cat stream, then you can already head over here, and we'll figure out how to make this interactive. So let's see what else is already here. There's Gitter, Twitch, and CLI. We were talking about how to do the client side like connection to the bot controller daemon. I'm curious how much of that is here. Twitch username. Oh, cool. TMI.js. That's funny. Oh, okay, that was still on the to-do list. I guess I could do that. I figured no one else would want to do that. It might be a separate library or something anyway. I never actually made a node library. Tuco is thoroughly exfoliating my hand right now. Is this, okay, so this is just like running, this is like, I was gonna say main, but it isn't actually main, it's just like all in the global scope. So we have, this whole thing needs to be in a retry loop. The whole reason for that is I want the chatbot to be able to tolerate the Rust server rebooting, which is, it's like extra code to write, but it makes things much, much nicer later on, right? To not have to start everything up in exactly the right order and then restart everything if any component of it dies. Like, I like that. So, like for example, the OBS plugin tries to reconnect. Sometimes it doesn't work, but usually it does. Tuco, this is some intense exfoliation, honey. Oh my gosh, this cat is so good. Let's see if I could get closer. Whoops. I didn't get that coordinate system right. It's like, put it in normal mode long enough to aim it, and then immediately put it in halt mode to stop the oscillation, because it's oscillating because of the computer vision at this point. Yeah, I love the experience of people being like, your bot is oscillating because it's a dumb dangly thing, and I'm like, no, it's oscillating because of a feedback loop between the brushless motors and the GPU. I mean, it's also oscillating because it's a dumb dangly thing, but that isn't actually the biggest source of oscillation right now. Oh gosh, Joseph is suggesting I run all this in Docker. No. I mean, I don't want to try to get OBS and hardware video transcoding working inside Docker. No thanks. That doesn't sound fun. I'm doing this in Windows to avoid the Linux graphics driver issues, and that just seems like the worst thing to ask for right now. And also, when I'm talking about like, let's write the software so it can handle like the two services not starting at the same time, and then the solution is let's wrap everything in Docker. I'm like, no, that doesn't help at all. No, that's a bad idea. Sorry. It's adding something that doesn't solve the problem. when the problem actually deserves to be solved in its straightforward manner. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways we could do the clients, but it did seem like Node is probably a decent platform. Because, you know, there are a lot of chat libraries, and this seems like an alright starting point, and I've got some JavaScript code to do the WebSocket communication, which mostly just needs porting from the web environment to Node.js. Is this the same? Okay, a lot of that's the same, and then there's a read line interface. Huh. That's interesting. I thought this was going to be something where you run a separate like instance of the command, but I guess it probably takes long enough for Node to start up that nobody likes doing that, so you have a little REPL or something. All right. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I think that the design we talked about with this was that the individual like chat clients would be responsible for any like one-on-one user interaction, so like answering help commands, maybe anything involving direct messages if that's ever a thing, which it probably won't be, but also like parsing the text, basically turning the user input into something that can be like deserialized into a Rust type automatically, probably. So doing everything that that kind of is like messy user string processing that is also potentially platform dependent, and it would also be responsible for getting the user identity into something that we can just like hand off to the server as a string. But then the server would have commands, well, it would have a separate kind of command like for manual controls like this versus for chat commands. And then on the server side, we would implement, stuff like the command queue and voting and whatever else we end up wanting to do for that. There's a bit of a temptation to kind of more microserviceify that and have some intermediate piece, which is like the interaction engine, and then that talks to the robot server separately. But I think there are just so many interconnections between those, like mostly around how the computer vision results are used and processed, but it also makes using telemetry a little nicer. Oh, cool. GTS is adding that they liked the diorama channel I tweeted recently, Luke Towen's channel on YouTube. Yeah, I'd forgotten about them for a while and then rediscovered them recently, and it's a really good channel. This cat is really good and distracting. So the thing with Docker is, like, it's Linux based, right? I mean, I think Docker has multi-architecture support. Like, most people use it for x86, and they just have like a universal image that you just run inside a container on any x86. But like, other people use Docker on ARM. Like, it's conceivable to me that there is a Windows flavor of Docker, but all the Docker deployments I know of are Linux containers, and the user space is pretty restricted. I haven't heard of people exposing a GPU to Docker. And if you did expose a GPU to Docker, I would expect it to be all the ways that Linux GPUs are already finicky, and then additional ways that are specific to whatever hack you had to go through in order to make that work. So Docker runs on Windows. That is obvious. What I'm saying I don't know if there is one of is a Docker that uses a container system which is not Linux based. That seems conceivable to me, but I haven't heard of something like that existing. Like, it seems conceivable that there would be another sub-architecture, kind of like ARM Docker, that's like Windows Docker, that uses like a Windows user space virtualization. But that probably doesn't exist. I would be a little bit surprised. The regular Docker Windows download runs a Hyper-V container with Linux in it, and then uses Linux containers to run the Docker images. And it's great if everything you're doing is storage or network, but I don't think it would handle other devices that great. Okay, so these seem like they're pretty straightforward, and they each have some, like, a little bit of front-end code there, but the code that connects back to the bot server kind of needs work. I mean, there are maybe some reasons to have another protocol there. The WebSocket protocol started out as something that was really for debugging. It gives you just a really high bandwidth connection to the internal message bus, and just like throws everything at you. So I'd been avoiding making that too complicated, because like obviously you could add filtering to that and make it more of like a publish subscribe thing. But if I'm going to go that route, I probably want to find an off-the-shelf protocol to use, but I would need to evaluate them really carefully to make sure that they can handle the kind of performance requirements I have. Basically, my performance requirement right now is I need it to not take a noticeable amount of CPU on the server side, and I need the clients to... I basically need the slowest client I can handle to just not completely fall over, which I guess the slowest client I'm using has been like an iPad on Wi-Fi. And yeah, it's been sending like a couple of megabytes per second of JSON over this WebSocket. And so I just have to make sure that the code is all written so that it doesn't do unnecessarily slow things with that giant stream of data. But if I switch to something else, I would need to make sure that it can handle data streams like that, because sometimes I will want to look at the whole message stream. But it would also be nice to get, like a publish-subscribe system that would let me do more filtering. There are ways I could shoehorn this into MQTT, but I don't know if MQTT is the right tool. All right, so then the other piece here is the message protocol, where we're actually talking to the bot server. So the WebSocket interface is just this like pretty straightforward thing. The things that it does that are not straightforward are really just around batching and performance and latency management. So all that WebSocket stuff lives in here, but then it doesn't really know much about the individual command formats. It has these message to client and message to server enums, which can send some other stuff like authentication, but mostly it's sending these batched up streams of timestamped messages, and then sending commands in the other direction. So commands are the things that we're getting from the client, usually, Public input is, we had a good reason for making that separate from command. Yeah, I think I wanted to make it possible not to authenticate. And then Morg started adding authentication code anyway. I think we were thinking that authentication might be useful. But I think part of the reason to have public input be separate from command is that public input would not require authentication. Like right here, they're fine except for the authentication requirement. Oh. Yeah, so I don't know much about MQTT. I've only looked into it a little bit, but one thing that I saw that was a little bit frustrating is that it seems to be really structured around sending individual data items that have fairly basic types. So either like an integer or I think a string, which you can put JSON in. And so for something like this robot, like I have data like this that you could put into MQTT, right? But if you put each individual item into MQTT as a separate data point, then I think that would just involve like lots more packets than are necessary, and then you would lose the association of which things came in at the same time. I like what I'm doing with InfluxDB, where I can kind of group these individual packets full of data into data points, much like I represent them internally. Like what you're seeing here is like this winch status thing is a separate message. Everything in here arrived at the same time, and there's a global timestamp for that packet. Then within the packet, there are several different subsystems represented, and then some of those have additional flow control information. Aiden says these values update quite a lot. Well, it would be updating faster if this wasn't having trouble keeping up. The browser is falling behind here. A lot of these update 250 times a second. So then the web interface here is limiting them to frame rate. So you should be seeing them update at 60 frames a second, but the browser can't quite handle that here. Some of these update slower. These update at 30 frames a second. The winch stuff updates at 60 frames. The messages for the winch come in at 250 frames a second, or messages a second, but the JavaScript code here is limiting it to 60. So yeah, and then another thing I could do with MQTT is like this entire packet could just be like one JSON blob, but I think that would be kind of inconvenient to use with a lot of MQTT tools, so I don't know if that would really work that well, so that seems to be kind of going against the grain, so I don't know. Do I have an MQ system in the background? I mean, sorta, but it's just like a really quick, like, in-process one in Rust. Like, it doesn't need to be a client-server thing. I mean, we could go into the details, but it's just like inter-process communication primitives in Rust. Like, it's just multi-threaded programming. It doesn't have a brand name on it. So, I mean, yeah, the data does change pretty fast, which is why usually you would graph it. So, like this stuff is all just in that same thing. Extensive burst of sensor and state data. I mean, it depends on what you mean by extensive. It's not that big. It's like less than 100 bytes, I think. I mean, I can show you what's in the packets. We're in that vicinity anyway. So, message.rs. How's the font size for folks? I can make this a little bigger. Oh, I accidentally opened the magnifier. Alright, so the idea behind this right now, commands are things that you need to be logged in to send. Public requests are things that don't exist yet that you can send without being logged in, which I think will include chat commands. Wait, what is... Yeah, so a public input here. This is still, like, nothing's using this yet. We can change this all we want. My plan here was this would be anything that comes in from a chat gateway, basically. This would identify what the gateway actually is, which would also act as a namespace for the senders. And then this would be like a username or an IP address or whatever is relevant to that platform. And then this would actually be, well, what did we just get asked to do? And that's going to have the commands. Right now, this is a placeholder with 2 numbers, which I was saying that this could be like the kind of 2 joysticks we were talking about, but that's going to get changed soon, probably. That was just there to develop something. And then messages are a superset of the public input and the commands, and these include just anything that the robot server can process on its internal message bus. Madbeggar's asking if I was using Grafana or something like that. Yeah, so there are two different plotting systems. There's... Tuco is sneezing. Are you okay, honey? He seems fine. Okay, so yeah, there are two graphing systems. There's the real-time system that you're seeing here that's based on that WebSocket interface. That one gets every message that goes through the server. And so you get all the messages. They're time-stamped every time the message is received. And then those are batched up into slightly chunkier pieces. And that chunk size actually just depends on the measured latency to the client. And then the client does graphing using smoothie charts. So that's what you're seeing, like this stuff. So the client actually, there are some options here. Sometimes it'll aggregate the data down to just 1 point per frame. And sometimes it'll actually take every point. So I think this graph is actually using all the points. So every 250 hertz, all those points end up here. Whereas some of these other graphs are only using 1 data point per frame. Like I think most of these are 1 data point per frame. But then the Grafana stuff, that goes through InfluxDB. It's not real time at all. There's maybe like a 30-second delay between the data getting generated and going in there. Oh, am I logged out? Sort of. All right, so this is Grafana. This is a web front end for InfluxDB, which is a time series database. This is sort of separate. So there's an in-process message bus, which is what these messages go through. Specifically, is the message bus in this file too? I think that's in here. Yeah, controller port is this like message bus interface that we have. Timestamp messages, bus reader. Oh yeah, it uses this Rust crate called bus as that's like a single producer multi-consumer queue. And so there's one thread that's the single consumer, and then many other threads that act based on that, which fit my needs pretty well because I kind of already wanted to have a single central control loop thread that handles the incoming messages. But there are a bunch of other threads for things like LED animation and network communication and the WebSocket clients, the gamepad, you know, there's a bunch of threads. And yeah, the Rust bus crate is kind of nice. I was using a different one before that was actually multi-producer and multi-consumer, and it seemed really cool at first, but then I ran into performance problems with it. And this one's been pretty good so far. But yes, this is my message queue. Doesn't have a brand name, it's just called bus. I don't know what your question is with 60 data points a second being a problem, Aiden. That's about the rate that I've got the data going into Grafana to right now. So I have another module here in the Rust server, which listens to the in-process data bus and then downsamples some of the metrics to a configurable rate, which I think I have right now set to like 50 hertz. And then it sends those less frequent samples out to InfluxDB. And so you can see here I'm just like cherry picking individual fields that I wanted to save to the database. The stuff in the in-process message bus doesn't get saved anywhere. It's just all transient. Whereas this stuff gets saved on disk for, I think I have it saving it for like a month right now. That's all just configurable right now. So this puts together batches of data points, which then go out over HTTP to the InfluxDB server. Metric sampler. And those end up over here, where I can get so much data. Thanks, Windows. I would really like to disable those snapping behaviors because they don't work right in this multi-monitor configuration. So yeah, input controls. Wow, what was going on the message bus here? Oh, this was me turning on the debug rectangles. Yeah, a lot more traffic on the message bus to send all the debug rectangles. Video encoder. Sorry, my nose is super congested right now. Probably hurting it. I think Medbugger is asking about how that bus module works. I think that it has a way of grouping the clients together and then giving those groups of clients their own copy of the data in a FIFO queue. I don't think this one's lock-free, it's just really fast. I think lock-free stuff is really alluring, but it isn't always necessarily the fastest option in these days with modern processors. So we got a lot of data. Some of it's really useful for debugging motion. And all that's just getting stored in the telemetry database. We can zoom in on one of these data points, like let's say I move the wind tray here. See that? This is the really annoying oscillation, and it didn't start until pretty close to the end. These frequency components look pretty different. It'd be interesting to actually look at this in an FFT, though. And then I bet once we get to the winches, they'll start to have problems around here. Oh yeah, there's the little kick that we didn't want. And that little burst of velocity, right? So there's a lot to debug in here. But yes, there's a graphonograph thing. That's where it is. Oh, thank you. Multitasking. Can disable the snap on this machine. Yeah. See, this would be great if it worked, but it doesn't with this layout. Thank you. Aiden is asking, where will the chat interact with the flyer, back end and front end? I don't know what you mean. I don't understand the question. GTS is asking if Grafana would break with like a 5 kilohertz sampling rate. Grafana itself, I don't think would break. Your InfluxDB queries might start to be pretty slow. But yeah, I don't know, that you might be starting to push it, but it's a good question. I had this running, and like, what do you mean 5 kilohertz, like per thing, or like a bunch of things at 5 kilohertz, or one thing at 5 kilohertz? Because I was recording data at 100 hertz and it was fine. It was just filling up the hard disk. I mean, not that badly. I just didn't want to like leave it running all year, running at 100 hertz necessarily. But I mean, it seemed all right recording like a lot of data points, a lot of separate things at 100 hertz. Like more than 50 separate things? I don't know, maybe. Aiden is like, can't you just, if I'm not using the joystick, keep still? Yeah, it sort of does that, but the algorithm needs, like, it needs this thing that I haven't written the code for that I could describe to you if you want. Like, do you want this to be story time about the code that I'm writing next week, or story time about the code that I'm writing today? Because yeah, I mean, that is part of the algorithm, but there are some subtle reasons why it's not working right now, and I need to just like fix that particular thing. Aiden's asking, how will chat move the gimbal? I mean, I think with commands that indicate some kind of, well, I think there'll be a couple different layers. Like there might be some commands that are specifically about influencing the computer vision, but the basic thing would just be similar to the manual controls that I have right now, and a direction and some kind of magnitude. Like, I'm imagining that the acceleration will be fixed, and there will be some kind of adjustable duration up to a limit. So what is here for the WebSocket stuff so far? There's reading the connection file. There's getting the first line. Experimental URL package. Why? All right, well, maybe this isn't the right place to start. I mean, we'll want to do some surgery in this code in the near future, but maybe I want to take the client code I've got and try to rework it into a Node.js library. And I want it to be async, and I want it to support reconnecting, because I don't want this to all break anytime one of the processes breaks. I just don't like creating brittle systems. And it, like, I'm not even going to go there if you're like, well, you should create brittle systems and then put them in Docker and reboot them automatically. It'd be really cool if I could refactor this code so it would work on Node and on web. Didn't I do this kinda with that in mind? I thought this reconnecting WebSocket component might have already had that property. Thought I had that in autocomplete. No, we don't. Okay, we don't need to like keep swinging the pendulum in both ways. And then like Madbagger's like, Docker is an excuse for bad code. No, that's not true either. Docker is a container. All right, it's a container. It's not a solution for completely unrelated problems. It's not something that automatically means your code is bad. It's just a container. Can we stop polarizing everyone? Yeah, that's fun. So this is already cool. Maybe I just need to make some stuff modular. I don't really know how to make modular JavaScript stuff, but I should really learn. Part of the problem here is that this current bot connection is a React component, and that's not the abstraction boundary I want. I want the React component to be on top of something else, which is lower level. There's not that much here, but it would also be a quick little library of some sort. Open issue through this. Yeah. Yeah, that seems fine. I'm looking at this partly as a consumer, but then partly like, oh, well, my library might be similar to this. What are the kids doing these days? It's like, oh, this is written in TypeScript. Cool. I've never actually used TypeScript. That does seem like something I should learn. And this is... is TypeScript the one providing this module system? Or is that something separate? I'm also just thinking, like, from a development point of view, I don't want to, like, push this onto NPM. Like, I want this to be... I mean, maybe it belongs as a submodule in the Tuco, or, like, another submodule in the Tuco Flyer repo, or Tuco Flyer GitHub organization. James is like, can we all agree that Docker is a thing we shouldn't talk about in chat today? I don't know. We could talk about Docker. not to like poke the hornet's nest, but I do actually like. I think Docker is pretty interesting, and I have not used it much, but I used it a little bit kind of recently for trying out like InfluxDB and related stuff, and that was actually pretty interesting. And I've been kind of curious about the multi-platform aspects of Docker and like how you could use it to build embedded systems and stuff like that. So that might be interesting. Aiden is asking if you can Docker VMware or another Docker. So Docker is a user space virtualization layer, or rather it's like a management layer on top of like, I don't actually know if the container system is something that they did or if it was an existing Linux feature. The main thing Docker is a management layer and just like a standard people could rally around. Compressed chunks. So regarding compressing the WebSocket stuff, yeah, I'm kind of curious about that too. I haven't tried doing the compression in browser, but I think it should be possible to enable transport level compression on the server side. And that's something I should be trying to do if it isn't already happening. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of how I ended up making my own streaming protocol for this, is I just needed to make sure that it could handle the fire hose efficiently. And now it's like, well, I don't always want the fire hose. Maybe what I'm hearing is that the existing protocols aren't amazing either, and I should just add some filtering to mine. Well. Okay, LXC, thank you. That's the name of the container system. Yeah, and so like Docker's like the NPM, like all the cool kids know how to like write config files for it thing that like gets the public facing side of that, but like underneath it's like a container system, right? And it's like a particular flavor of Linux, and the benefit is that it's standardized. But I'm also curious because it seems like there are some little like sub-architectures there, so it's like kind of standardized, but it's kind of got some wiggle room for doing weird things with, like running on other architectures. Oh man, I don't really know anything about AMD either. I mean, I know it's a type of module format for JavaScript modules, but yeah, I also don't know what that is. And what the heck is rimraf? And NYC? Are those in the dev dependencies? Oh yeah, those are both just things I could look up on NPM. Watch someone who doesn't know how to do JavaScript do JavaScript. Now, actually, I feel pretty comfortable with JavaScript. It's just that the ecosystem has so many little sub-components that I never would have run across unless I, you know, like dip my toes in something new every so often. Oh, what? Okay. See, this is how JavaScript and Python are different. In JavaScript, this would be like a tiny little single-purpose library that has a cute but inscrutable name. And in Python, it would just be like part of the standard library. All right, and what about NYC? And in Rust, it would be like maybe part of the standard library, maybe on crates, maybe you got to write it yourself. I don't know. What? What does NYC have to do with Istanbul? They're not sister cities, are they? I'm like this far down the page and I still have no idea what this even is. What? I know what Babel is. I don't know what Istanbul is in this context. What am I supposed to do? Google for NYC Istanbul? Is that going to give me flights? Istanbul JS. Okay. It's a pet peeve of mine when software projects take over unrelated names. A code coverage tool, thank you. Now we know what it does. So can we have, I guess the thing that ultimately I want is to then have this be in a submodule and, well, a separate repository, and then I guess the question is it easier to use Git submodules or to use like a Git repo dependency? I think there's a way to have dependencies point to Git versions instead of NPM versions. Git URLs as dependencies, cool. That seems fine. So, yeah, it does seem like I want a separate repo for a client, and we should just try to port that code. All right. I need to refill my tea. I'll be right back. We need a good name for this. I think it's probably just going to be like Tuco Flyer Client, though. TucoFlyer.js. Oh, it is raining outside. Would it make sense for this this repo to be like a command line tool also? How did these folks do tests? So I could just have like a test.js or something that just does something. I mean, we could have like an actual unit test framework, but my first concern is just like, how do I even structure this so I can have like a little top level program in here to try out my library with. I think bot client would be the name for this, because, you know, by analogy with all these other bot things. Or JS client. That's ugly. Client. Thinking about how this API is going to work, the way keys, like the way authentication keys get into the system is somewhat different. In the web environment, this just gets it from somewhere else, but I'm actually saving the key into local storage at some point. I forget exactly where that is. Yeah. Where do we do that? I think there's some dependency I'm using that automatically saves stuff like that in local storage. React local storage. How does that work? There is actually a bug in that right now, so I'm curious if I can also fix this bug while I change the design. And the bug is that if you have a browser tab that's already open to Tuco Flyer and you paste in a new URL that has a different key, I don't think it'll actually change the key. So it's like I'm picking the wrong time to sample the key. Because I think what happens is when I paste in the URL, if only the fragment portion is different, it won't trigger a reload. So the URL changes, but it doesn't reload. Everybody's fine, except I don't end up actually saving the new key. Oh, there's the local storage mix-in. Okay. And that's just on bot connection. So I think this bot connection component itself will stay pretty much the same. This library will want to have a function exposed that can get a key from the URL. because this will get a URL. I'll also have other code that wants to turn a URL into a key, and they can share that code. Is this synchronous or is this returning promises? Yeah, that's returning a promise. So this stuff, some of this would stay in this component. We would be passing the location hash off, getting the key, saving the key, and then telling the other component, like, start connecting if you want. This is such a simple library, though. It's just code that I don't want to be duplicating in several places. The only reason to include the name in there is that it's conceivable I might want a library for doing C++ clients. There is already a C++ client, it's just part of the OBS repository right now, or the OBS plugin. That just doesn't seem like a very JavaScript-y naming scheme. But client.js with capitals and dashes. Is there actually documentation on this? I thought this would be a good place for them to have information on how to name packages, but I don't know if they actually give people info on that. I think I want the repository to be named like this for consistency with the rest of the org, but then the actual npm module would just be bot client in lowercase. Oh gosh, what language are we writing in? JavaScript or TypeScript? None of these are even in here. Why is there a gitignore for action script? I guess you compile that. Just, like, what would you even put here for a JavaScript project, if anything? This is not me, like, wondering what I should do. This is me wondering, like, what the kids do these days. Like, I feel like I've got to clarify every question I ask, because this is not me asking for advice. This is me describing what's going on in my head. And it's usually just trying to make sense of the world rather than trying to plot a course forward. But I'll ask for advice when I want it, but usually I'm just like, what's even going on here? Oh, they have one for Node. Why is it Node specifically? I guess I'll find out if I pick it and then see what's in the file, but like, I guess I don't know what that would mean. Power and grunt. Yeah, this isn't even Node. This is like some popular Node options and stuff. That's weird. That was definitely what I want, though. Anyway. Oh, Tuco does look really relaxed right now. All right. Is that what I want? Name. Name of what? Name of, I assume, the package itself. That could be more specific. 1.0 is not quite what we're talking about here. Sure. Entry point, sure. Test command. I'm gonna write a separate test command. It would maybe even be nice to have like a... I don't know, I could imagine a command line front end for this that would be really useful, where you could give it a connection file, it would connect, and then you could give it like some way of filtering out the messages or a particular message to send. I haven't done that much with this though, because most of that kind of debug functionality I've been putting in the web front end directly. So like that's why this web front end has the really low level stuff in this net panel over here. There's all this stuff, but then there's also this console where you can just like send it strings. And you can even just like figure out what the command schema is by process of just trying one thing at a time and looking at the error messages. Alright, let's just make that test.js for now. Git repo, yeah, that's fine. Keywords. Remind me what the ISC license is. I was gonna make it MIT style, but then I forgot exactly what this one even is. That's pretty basic. Well, I already chosen the MIT style license, but I don't think it matters that much. Copy this file to start with. I don't want to write this in... I don't want to write this in like old school JavaScript. I probably at least need to set up Babel. How does any of that work? Right, this all just uses the React. What is it called? It's this thing. It's like I forget what this is called. It's like a bootstrapper that creates a React project for you. So like right underneath this is like Babel and a bunch of other things. This is using TSC to build. What is that? Oh, TypeScript compiler maybe? I've never used TypeScript, but it certainly seems like a good option. Like I could use Babel and just write this in like ES6 and transcode it to something that browsers can deal with, which is what I'm getting like as part of the build process when that code lives in this project. But if I move it into a separate module, I've got to do that separately. So what is... TypeScript looks fun. I could learn this. We have types, we have interfaces. What is interoperability between TypeScript and JavaScript like though? Because I mean, I probably want the exterior interface of this to be plain JavaScript. Like what do these interfaces actually mean? I'm a noob at TypeScript. Tell me about TypeScript, internet. I know TypeScript gets transpiled into JS. I just don't know what the language features are. I'm just gonna assume everyone is always trying to tell me things that I don't need to know and just not look at chat. Sorry, I'm such a grumpus today. I should just see what the compiler gives me. So like we've been talking about, or I've been rambling one-sidedly about two different compilers, TypeScript and Babel, and like they're both just ways of writing more modern JavaScript and converting it into something which is more widely runnable in browsers. And like Babel is the one that I'm more used to, and it supports a lot of different output formats. TypeScript is its own thing, but it's specifically like a kind of newer language which is intended to be somewhat strongly typed at compile time, but that's about as far as I know, and I'm not familiar exactly with like how it would translate the TypeScript to JavaScript, and like which of those guarantees are lost as soon as you do the transpilation, and which ones are enforced in some other way in the JavaScript code, and is there any kind of name mangling? What do interfaces turn into? Those are the kind of questions I have. And I think the easiest answer is to just try compiling it and read the source code to the result. So is that node modules? What does this look like on Windows? What? TypeScript, I'm making the mistake of reading chat again. I'm just gonna stop that. Why do we need chat anyway? C#. Why? Was this, like, I wouldn't have gotten the inclination at all that this was related to C#, but okay. Oh, did I lose my paste buffer? Okay. So person doesn't seem to exist anywhere here. So I'm assuming that's just a concept at the TypeScript layer. So is that not useful for making module in TypeScript then? My feelings right now are that this might be actually really interesting to learn on a larger project, but right now I'm more into this being written using the same technologies that I'm using for the main web interface here, which would be Babel. Yeah, let's just figure out how to set this up with a similar Babel configuration. That's just also slightly not straightforward because I've got this like create React project thing, which is actually handling the Babel right now. I could do this thing where I eject the React scripts, but I don't know if that's actually the easiest way to get the. I mean, and I wouldn't commit that. I would revert that, but just like as a way of getting the underlying config. But maybe there's a quicker tool that will just let me set up Babel in a similar way. First of all, what is that thing called? I think it's... create React app. Yeah. Oh, and there's a TypeScript version even. Interesting. Yeah, I get that, but how does it actually work? Maybe the easiest way to see under the hood is actually just to eject the create script. Are there actually just some other repos that have the back end for this? Actually, I thought there was something here that connected the build system here to some special hook in there, but this is actually just for... Like, there are these scripts specifically, but... Actually, how does this invoke the transpiler? Oh, I think that's in here. I think that does something special. Is it not in here? Is that not there? This is like way over here. Wow, they have a bagel plugin. I would much rather have a bagel plugin right now. Take that tasty bagel and plug it right into my face. There's a bagel preset. And this isn't what I want though, because the thing I'm doing isn't creating a React app, it's just creating a library. I was just hoping to do it using similar configurations, but let's just find a vanilla guide for getting started with a Babel. Oh, build systems. How are these all different? This is... I don't think this is gonna work. Because if I make this... So my plan currently is to have a Git repo which has this little module which is just a little JavaScript client that talks to the bot server. And then that would then be used by the bot server itself for the built-in web front end, as well as it would be used by all the chat clients. Like, if I were just doing this without, I don't know, if I didn't already have the repos set up the way that they are, I would be really tempted to just write this code in one repo, have that be a single chat client, but then it would be harder to add additional chat clients in the future. I mean, it's nice to be able to have multiple clients, so having a separate repo with this library is going to be useful in the future. It's just annoying right now. Because, like, yeah, like any of these build steps, I think the way people usually do this is you get your library working and done or whatever, and then you build it, and then you publish the built files to npm, and then that's what gets downloaded. So that's nice for a thing that you're developing and then sending off to other people, but the thing I want right now is just, like, I'm still just developing for myself, and I want to be able to go back and forth between these repos easily. I don't want to have to release versions of this connector. So I could just write it in plain JavaScript. That would just be a little bit annoying, but that seems like the simplest way to do it. Or rather, I don't really see another good way to do it, honestly. So I need an index.js. But I need to, I guess I just need to understand these package models better. Yeah, what is AMD? And do I need it? Oh, asynchronous. This sounds like something I don't need right now. I want my files to have a nice external interface. I want exports that are compatible with ES6 is, I guess, what I'm going for. So how does this stuff work? Oh, stop dinging. Sorry. I think that when you just import something with a single name like this, is that the return value of the module? Because like when you run a module with require in Node, it has a return value, which is how you usually export things. You can tell I do a lot of JavaScript around here. Let's see how Crypto.js works. I guess the thing that I'm doing that is a little bit weird is, I mean, not like weird, but is very, very slightly non-standard, is trying to write code that runs both in Node and the browser, which there are, seems like multiple ways of doing. The reconnecting WebSocket claims to work with Node or browser. I wonder how that works. We were just over there. Yeah, AMD build available, but and this doesn't. Yeah, this does need building. I should just see what the code looks like here after I compile it. I was expecting to see this create a nested scope. Why doesn't it make a nested scope? Then it just writes to module.exports. How does that work in the browser? Because I know, like, in NPM, this is just compatible with the native module system. There must just be something else that will load this into the browser. Is that browserify? This is not normally a web API, this require. Where does that come from? And then I think you would normally use require with React, except I'm using it in ES6, and so it has these import statements instead. And how does this build work? I actually really do want to know just how this sets up its build specifically with, like, what does it generate? Let's look at the output maybe. Service worker.js. Is that for the auto reload thing maybe? Is that all we got? And this is just the whole things. Oh, this is Webpack, right? So Webpack is going to emulate some module API. That's got to be how it works. I only vaguely know how Webpack works. Oh, CommonJS. Ah, that's ES 2015. Great. That's the piece I was missing in my head. So it's Node and then Webpack. Interesting. Exports and require. Cool. Let's just see how far we can get then. This other package had a private variable set, right? That keeps this from being published. I think I want that. Maybe that'll change in the future, but right now I see no reason for this to ever end up on NPM. So I just want to make sure by setting private. And let's take that out, because I don't think I want to use TypeScript right now. There's... So I want to be able to use this in the browser and in Node, which is great. The interfaces for those two different places are just kind of different at this point. Specifically... Specifically, I want this to do file system stuff on Node. And I wonder if that should be... Do I need that to have dependencies? Because like on Node, I'd be using just the built-in like FS and OS module, maybe. But I mean, there might need to be... Like, I thought about maybe having it do like file system watching, so that if I restart the server, it notices the connection file changes, but I don't think that's necessary because the WebSocket connection will die, and if it just pulls that file right before reconnecting, that gives me, I think, all the behaviors I want. So I think just the built-in Node file system stuff works, but then of course that doesn't work in browser and won't import in browser. I could import it conditionally at runtime. That seems like bad practice. I could keep the file system stuff elsewhere. Like another module. Can NPM packages have optional features, I wonder? Yeah, it's like what pattern would I even use for something that has like a file system-y part and the non-file system-y part? It does seem like if I were just like happy to split this into arbitrarily tiny modules, then having one module for the authenticated WebSocket connection and then another module for getting the authentication key from a local file, that could be a thing. Yeah, Alex says getting this part of JavaScript set up can be really frustrating. It's hard to find any single simple best practice. Yeah, right. Like I think that's what the create React app thing in the first place was trying to do, but I mean it's very specific to React. So if you're making a React app, it gets that started really quickly, but you kind of have to buy into at least a few opinionated choices at that point. Okay, let's try to ignore the file system stuff. Let's pick a first milestone. So first milestone is I can take this same code and move the relevant parts into a separate module and then have my web interface use those parts. So just like extract it into a library, use the new library, but not add any new functionality. Just do that first. Bot model, I don't think I want here. Parts of bot connection. I just want to have those node file system APIs in my head. I can just do like an async read file, right? That's all I need. But yeah, all of that code ideally would be in a separate package that's not even used in the browser code. Oh. A path module. Who would be using that? Gourmet browser node. It's a funny name. This is just a copy of the standard library file. That's fine. Tape. What is tape? There isn't even a test directory here. Okay, whatever. So we do need crypto.js for the challenge, the authentication challenge response thing. something like that works. Actually, can I use... No, I can't use let. And then this is only useful on the browser side, so I should leave it out. Yeah, maybe what I want is the ability to easily have the user of this library provide a function which will go out and check for a connection key. So on the browser, it would do something like what we were just doing, look for it in the fragment and extract it from the query string. On the node side, it would need to grab it from a file, but maybe I could provide some little separate thing to help with that. And then where does fetch come from? Where does this promise API come from? That seems like what I want, one of these two. I'm curious how these are implemented. These packages that have different implementation for Node and browser. Huh. I guess they just have separate entry points. And there aren't separate dependencies, they just use all the dependencies. Interesting. Oh, promises. Cool. Ah, promise polyfill. Yeah, this is just like how deep do you want to go in the rabbit hole of modern JavaScript versus how much do you want to just write a simple thing? This seems fine. Let's do this. Oops. How does this just stick fetch in the global scope like that? It's adding, oh, yeah, how does that? I kind of don't want that. Yeah, what is this like? Pony fill? What is a pony fill? Uh... Oh, well, you succeeded at making me laugh and brightening my day. Thank you. But what? This just seems like avoiding anti-patterns, but I'm glad they gave it a cute name. Yes, that's what I wanted. Now that I know what your cute name means. Does that still need some kind of promise polyfill? Oh, yeah. Does Node already have promises? Is there really a global dot promise? Okay. Interesting. Oh, was it going to print the results anyway? That would be the P in the REPL. Fun. My Little Pony Phil. Is there something like this for file system? Because that would be simple. It'd be kind of cool to have a module that just lets me import file system, and then, I mean, maybe, can I conditionally import it? I should just go back to plan A.5 and make it a callback. Oh, what do I want to export? Bot client object, maybe? I'm like looking at how the TypeScript compiler generates classes, because it's been a while since I've written a plain JavaScript class. Curious, like, which pattern they follow here. Are they setting everything up in the constructor? Looks like it. Where do we return this? Oh, do you not need to return this in JavaScript? I guess you don't. What is that for? They're binding this way up there, which, oh, that's to use it from inside this function. Gotcha. Yeah, that seems fine. Let's do something like that. When you first create one of these, you don't necessarily know that much about it. When do we have to create this reconnecting WebSocket? We probably want the lifecycle of this component to basically match the React component lifecycle. It might also make sense to export multiple things, because I think I will need something to, like, I'll need that little utility that the, yeah. Let's have this be a scope. Can I do that? And then I like this function. Can I even do that in current JavaScript? Or, I guess so. I guess that isn't a thing. What actual version of JavaScript does Node implement these days? Shipping features. Oh, Node doc. Oh, neat. Great. This is Node.green, which is language support for ES 2015 in Node. Ooh, tail calls. For of loops. Well, this is neat. This is further along than I thought it was. So we can rely on modern stuff in Node, just not necessarily in browsers. What about modules? I don't see import in here. Huh. Yeah, why doesn't it support imports? That didn't answer my question. Wow. That's pretty weird. Imports with URL semantics. Okay, well that looks nice. It's just this is still in the future. Where is this on node.green though? So this is ECMA script modules. This just isn't even on the list yet. So there's a reason this is green. They add stuff that is expected to work, I guess. Except for this stuff. That's almost up, I guess. Weak references. I like how this shows you the test right there. That's nice. SIMD? Really? Is this coming? SIMD intrinsics in Node. That would be neat. Yeah, I don't know where the module stuff would be on. I would have expected it to be on this list. Anyway. That's fun. I think I want to make this layer in between the WebSocket info and the WebSocket itself internal. I guess the thing that this needs to know right here is just the HTTP portion of the URI and the key, if there's a key. If the key changes or if the presence of the key changes, then we need to get a new connection. And that's actually just a limitation of the underlying protocol. The protocol will only send you an authentication challenge at the beginning of the connection. You can't ask for one later. I don't feel like changing that. I don't think that should need to change. So these things change. I was using these events here, which was kind of handy. Do I want to make it depend on that? I probably don't. Is there another event system that the reconnecting WebSocket is already using that I can also use? It sounds really rainy outside. Oh, this has no dependencies. That's cool. This is just shuffling around the native event listeners that are part of the WebSocket. I'm thinking about how I want to attach callbacks to this. Like, this feels like a problem I've run into before. Like, I want to create my own event listeners on my object that you can attach handlers to. The DOM has its own standard way of doing that, but I don't think you can do that on your own objects. This is just a map module called events. That's what I was using on that side. Maintainer needed, build failing, cool. This is like a snapshot of Node's ecosystem right here. Build failing, maintainer needed, 150,000 downloads in the last day. Oh. Oh, is this something that's built into Node, but not in the browser again? Oh gosh. I keep getting this window in this position where the vertical resize handles are both off screen. .1080p is just not enough pixels to work in. I think we can just depend on this too. That's fine. Yeah, I wonder if I can even just, like, which events were these? Can I even just have the event emitter live in this library and forward them? These are... Do I want this in all the clients? This is like parsing out different kinds of messages and setting up separate events, which is kind of nice, actually. I was gonna take a long walk, but it's raining, and I guess I could do that. It would just be more of like a walk with rain, which would be a somewhat different experience. does everything go in bot client? There's this very terrible part of me that just wants to do a require inside of a callback function, which doesn't seem like a good idea. Yeah, I probably want to avoid the file system dependency, unless I can find something that is viable outside of just Node. So I'm curious, it would actually be helpful to have a module that just gives me like a fake non-existent file system API in the browser, but exists so that I can write the same code in both places. Which is not like the best strategy. The best strategy would be to split it up into even more tiny modules, probably, but I'm just curious if this is even a viable strategy. This is possibly not a good idea, but if I had something that seemed like a file system that worked on local storage, I could actually just, in the browser client, instead of using that other React local storage mixin thing that I was using, I could actually just store the connection.txt file or some approximation of it. That's not perfect, though, because I don't need to store the URL. The URL is implied by where I'm connecting to. I really need to store the key. It isn't exactly the same in either mode, though. It looks like you still have to pick a layer manually. that want to be a host name or a partial URL or what? Oh. Yeah, that's expecting someone else to do the parsing. And on the browser, that's expecting it to be a relative path, which is not helping. I feel like this doesn't make the most interesting stream, watching me fumble around with JavaScript. I don't know, I'm distracted for multiple reasons. One of those being that I need a restroom break, so I'll be right back. But let me know if you're interested in this. I feel like this is a bit tedious to stream, and I think maybe, I don't know if folks are actually into it, but I don't know. Let me know what you think. I usually would just be suffering through this on my own, and it'd be fine. All right. Well, I think the combination of this being like boring stuff to watch and me being super antisocial right now, I'm just gonna say goodbye to all of you. But thanks for showing up and hanging out. And special thanks to everyone who sticks around and supports the stream. It's